On February 4th, 1968, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King offered his last sermon at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. He titled his sermon that morning, "The Drum Major Instinct." And he said it was inspired by a scripture verse that's found in Mark's Gospel. It is in the 10th chapter, the 43rd verse. And that verse reads, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." And after sharing that passage, Reverend King went on to say, if you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. That's a new definition of greatness. And this morning, the thing that I like about it, by giving that definition of greatness, it means that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato or Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics and physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant. And you, all of you, are that servant. And so on this Volunteer Appreciation Day, we're going to spend some time taking a look at the idea of a soul's call to service. And of course, we're going to take some time to honor and to celebrate how that call is consistently honored and expressed so beautifully by you, not only here in our ministry, but far beyond as well. Now, when the title for this lesson came to me many months ago, the soul's call to service, I jotted it down, and I felt at that time that the lesson would head in a direction of speaking of being in service to others. And then when I sat down to start focusing a bit more on the lesson this past week, I came upon a quote from Marianne Williamson. And she had said, "The soul is the truth of who we are." The soul is the truth of who we are. And that got me thinking a bit more broadly about the soul's call to service and our acts of service. I began considering it more of a two-way street. Service to others, and also service, or maybe attention is a better word, but service or attention to ourselves. Over my years in ministry, in every ministry I have served or been associated with in some way, I've heard one comment from volunteers very consistently. And that is that more often than not, when they are in service to others, they feel as if they are receiving more blessings than they are giving. There's another experience I've had many times over the years as well. And this one comes from time spent in spiritual counseling with someone, and specifically around the idea that they have a sense of feeling a bit lost, feeling like they're in a rut, wondering, or having uncertainty about their purpose in life. And one thing that I will usually offer at times like that is that they consider stepping into volunteer service. So again, being in service to others. However, the reason I offer that suggestion is that doing so will very often lead them to find the answers they are seeking for and about themselves. And so in a way, there is an aspect of being in service or paying closer attention to ourselves when we talk about a soul's call to service. And so when I sat with that in light of Miss Williamson's comment about the soul being the truth of who we are, I decided to take a closer look at looking closer for our soul's calling. A closer look at how this calling might be the place to start in order to show up for others from our truest of selves, and therefore having a greater impact and making a greater difference in the lives of others. And so let's start with that soul's call. And this isn't a specific call of the soul, like to a vocation or to a relationship or something like that. Rather, it's just the soul's call itself. And perhaps two things we can note about that call is that first, it is a call coming from within us, as opposed to something from the outside world that could also call to us. And second, with it coming from within, from the soul, it is a call from our highest self, right? Our sacred self. And that call to us all of the time, regardless of the specifics that come later, is that it is to call forth the highest image and expression of that sacred self in our life experiences. I don't know that listening for one's call of the soul is something commonly taught, as we grow up and into the world. And it seems, if we think about it, it seems that much of what we are taught about living in the world, getting on in it, surviving in it, can sometimes lead us away or take us away from those very personal truths and this this deepest part of who we are, that soul aspect of us. But the soul is resilient, and the soul is very, very patient, at least for a while. But after a while, without getting any attention, without getting any kind of nourishment, it will become restless. And it will let us know that it is time for us to feed it a little bit. It is time to share our company with it for a while. An article I was reading included a quote from a book that was titled "When the Soul Awakens." And the authors noted that awakening occurs when the individual soul becomes satiated with material living and feels compelled by a deep inner urge to discover the truth that lies behind the outer world of appearances. Now, I would imagine that many of us have felt that urge in one way or another, perhaps many times over in the course of our lives so far. For example, have you ever been urged from within to just let go of the world's ideas of success and instead focus on what you want, what you need, just to be happy in your life? Or have you ever had the urge to find a way past the push and the pull between who you think you should be and who you are meant to be? Have you ever felt so lost in a particular role in your life that you wake up one morning not really knowing who you truly are anymore? Have you ever had that deep inner knowing that something or some things need to change, but you have no idea what they are or how to start affecting those changes? See, these things and others like them, these are times when your soul has been calling out to you, times that it has been inviting you to spend some time with it, to talk to it, to listen to it, to follow it. These calls are the ones that are just asking us to make a shift, to shift away just for a time from giving so much of our time and energy and attention to the many roles we do have in our lives, many of which meet the needs of others. And just for a time, give our time, attention, and energy to our own self, to our own growth, to our self-care, our self-love, to our own spirituality, to our own fulfillment. And perhaps most importantly, that wraps up all of those things and others, is to just be sure that we are living in alignment with our authentic selves. James Hollis is a Jungian analyst who said that if there is such a thing as a soul, then it is the soul that ultimately tips the balance towards a more authentic stance in the world. And what better stance to have when the time does come to be in service to others? So how might we know that it is our soul that is speaking to us? Well, Beth Janisch is an author. She also has a master's degree in nursing, but today her career is as a coach, and her work is focused on helping people discover the best of who they are. And a link to one of her blogs popped up. I was doing random researching, just throwing words into Google about service and service to others and a soul's call to service. And her blog, a link to her blog came up. And in it, she offered a few signs that would indicate that our soul may have come calling. And the first is that we find that all of the ways, all of the things that used to fill us, that used to satisfy us, no longer do. There is a sense that something is missing. Doesn't make any of those other things wrong or like you have to immediately let them go. It's just that they're not enough anymore. Something is missing. Another is we begin to feel a deep desire to make a difference and to be in service to something that is bigger than just ourselves. Sometimes it can be one of those urges that I noted a moment or so ago, one where you feel that there's something that just wants to come through you. You can feel it in your gut and you just don't have any idea what it is, but there's something that wants to come forth from you. Or in the midst of all the various roles that you do have in your life, you may find yourself asking, what is my purpose? What is my true, real, authentic purpose? Or it may be that you begin to feel it necessary to release or allow some things to fall away in order for that truest self to emerge to a greater extent. And that could be your relationships or career choices or habits or how you spend your time, how you feed your body, so on and so forth. Or maybe your values just start to shift. They used to be rock solid. And again, it doesn't make them wrong, but change is happening. So values, old ones just don't seem as powerful before new ones start to emerge. Priorities start getting reordered. New ways of being actually begin to shine through you. And then lastly, a very common one, you feel a great sense of discomfort. Great sense of discomfort as whatever it is that is happening, you know that it is drawing you into an unknown. And you have not even an ounce of clarity as to what's about to happen or how or when or even why. So again, I would venture to say that it's likely that all of us here today and those that will view this lesson online at a later date, have received at least one and likely several of these kinds of calls from our souls. And so the question always becomes, did we hear it? Did we hear it? And if we did, wonderful, as Dr. King said in his sermon. But if not, that's okay too, because there are ways that we can hone our listening skills. So let's say that we do find ourselves just feeling disconnected from our authentic self, or we feel stuck in a way of being, stuck in a way of living that no longer satisfies us or serves us in what we feel is the best of ways. And also let's remember that a lot of us weren't taught about feelings like this. A lot of us weren't taught, to understand this inner world of thoughts and intuitive, feelings and so forth. We weren't taught about a God that was loving and available to us and a part of us. I mean, many of us were taught that our souls needed to be saved, not something to seek out and actually listen to. But today, we do know. Today, we know we can come to each day with an understanding that true happiness and fulfillment and contentment really come about as we live from our spiritual natures as much as possible, to live from that essential and sacred self. And so here are just a few suggestions from Ms. Janisch as to how we can make room for the soul to appear and how we can hear it when it does. The first she offered is to view your symptoms in life as messengers. We sometimes, we're real quick. We have a tendency to put a Band-Aid on the symptom and pay no attention to the underlying cause. For example, just use the literal example of physical illness. We get sick in some way and the symptoms get treated and we get better. And then the illness comes back and the symptoms get treated and we get better. And then it can come back and the cycle just keeps repeating itself. Well, the message of those recurrences might be our soul calling out to us that it's time to reduce the stress in our life, which turns out to be the underlying cause of the illness. So examples like that can be found in other areas beyond physical health. I mean, we can receive messages for any element of our lives. So we want to try to remember that it really is worth going through the discomfort. You're not covering up the symptoms or giving them temporary fixes in order to find a deeper meaning that they can reveal for us. Another suggestion is to pay attention to what expands and what constricts your energy. We all have an energy flow moving, throughout our bodies, and Ms. Janish called the source of that energy a sign from our soul that helps us navigate the forces in our life. And she said one force is fear and constriction. The force of fear and constriction that drives us to remain the same and stay in our comfort zone. The other force, she said, is love and expansion that urges us to move through the discomfort into wholeness and into total, complete, absolute alignment with our highest self. So when energy is missing in us, or in you, it could be calling out to you that there's a deeper wisdom in you telling you that you've outgrown where you are. You've outgrown where you are. That comfort zone is no longer tenable. It's time for you to make some changes. And sometimes that absence of energy, if you will, it can feel more like a state of depletion, a state of depression, which is important to explore. It may also be a way of discovering what is and what isn't meant for you. For me, there was a time back in the late 1990s when I felt withdrawn. I felt, depressed, and I attributed it to experiences I was having at that time with chronic illness. I did go into therapy, and I was indeed diagnosed with clinical depression. But through doing the therapeutic work, what I came to understand was it had nothing at all to do with the illness. I was actually, kind of prospering, in and amidst that experience. My depression was centered in my work and the fact that joy had disappeared from my work. And so I want to stress that listening to the soul's call is not a replacement for seeking out professional help if you have feelings of depletion or depression or physical, symptoms and illness. But just consider that the soul and the secular can work together quite beautifully. Now, the next two suggestions I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on because I believe them to be very familiar to you. The first is to establish spiritual practices that keep you grounded and practice them consistently. And the second is to keep track of the synchronicities, the signs that the universe sends you. Those things that kind of make you tilt your head and say, oh, that was interesting. Write it down. Speak it into your phone, however you record things for yourself, even if the message of whatever it was isn't clear. If it was meant for you, it will become clear in the instant you are ready to receive it. The last suggestion is one of my own. That is to spend time with people, both professionally and in your personal lives and relationships, who, when you share your ideas, your thoughts, your questions, whatever, about your desire to find more of your truest self, they ask you a lot of questions. I remember back again to my earliest experiences with challenges and the unknown and the things that led me to seek, professional help. And I walked into those sessions with a very high expectation of having the answers given to me for every question I had. And was I surprised, and for a time a bit frustrated, to find that every question I asked was answered with a question in return. But it was the best thing that ever happened. And I use that same technique to this day in my personal relationships, in my professional life. You see, when we are asked questions about what we are asking questions about, it takes us one step closer, one step deeper to finding within ourselves all the answers we will ever need. See, others can only offer a best guess as to what is absolutely true for us. Whereas the absolute truth is the only thing the soul will ever tell us. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant. So why have I spent so much time serving the call of one's soul when volunteerism is all about being in service to others? Well, there's two reasons. One, I believe the more that we continue to tap into the truest of ourselves, going through whatever discomfort comes our way and coming out on the other side so much stronger as a result, the more we are going to be drawn to step into service for others and for our cities, our country, our world. And secondly, I believe that how we show up in our volunteerism is just as if not more important than the specific volunteer role we are filling. For example, if we've had a bad morning and we don't have the awareness, we're not grounded enough, we don't know the truth of our true selves in order that we can know how to set that aside before showing up to volunteer, then we're going to show up exuding bad day energy to everybody we meet, people we're supposed to be helping. And we can come up with all kinds of examples along those lines, but I don't think we have to, because of what all of you have demonstrated in just the beginning months of this year of 2021. We began this year saying a bit of a good riddance to 2020. But then last month, we took time. On a Sunday, we felt our sadness, we felt our grief and so forth as we acknowledged the 1-year anniversary of this pandemic and all the challenges and all the unknowns and all those quote unquote opportunities for growth, as we like to say, came along. But in and amidst and through all of that, your commitment to service to others, your hearts and your souls moving with grace and from such love, shone through with a light that shone perhaps the brightest I have seen it to date. And that's saying something. That is saying something. So I'm going to name some names to start. Kelly Lambert, who is so passionate about music, especially the drumming, the connection that it offers to others, something that's been missing for him throughout the time of the shutdown. Well, not all that long ago, he and some of his music friends, they just took it upon themselves to go downtown and have a pop-up drumming concert for whoever was fortunate enough to be there and receive the lift that provided. Brooke Borgeson Gray, just recently, within the last couple of weeks, she had stopped by the church here and she was telling me how much of her volunteer service was still continuing in Haiti with other colleagues that she works with, that mission of service to that country and the women in particular, even though they can't be together right now. And now, as she shared and does a check-in for us every week almost, she's out giving vaccine shots to people to help us get on the other side of this pandemic sooner rather than later. Yvette Babin Ringsmith, our birthday girl for the morning, and then along with so many of you who answered her call, she organized and offered, all offered dinner to the guests at the Safe Harbor organization or the facility for some of the most affected by the threat of COVID-19. Roger Hersberger, who stepped up once again and volunteered to lead and coordinate and organize and bring back our small group discussion, the gathering, another needed opportunity for connection with each other and really delving into the depths of those who choose to participate. Ernie Kachalia, again, along with Raleigh and Nancy Newman, who very recently, again, have offered their time, their talents, their financial support in the repair work we needed to have done on both locks and doors on our outside shed here at the church. Several of you offering your service of time, money, food, presence, prayers, and so much more to several in our congregation family who have been moving through and continue to move through some very significant health challenges this year. Several of you, again, making financial contributions, totaling nearly $500 for our outreach service to the Father Fred Foundation and all that they can continue to offer in service to others as a result. So many of you, in just the last 2 weeks, I asked, and before I shut down the meeting, the chat box was full with people volunteering to support our June craft fair that we're planning to have, as well as the next 2 Sundays that we're going to be doing our services outside in our amphitheater, which requires a little bit more assistance than the indoor services do. And then lastly, to those whose names I don't know, I wish I did, but I know it doesn't matter, but whoever it was that has come by the church over the last few weeks and cleaned out our labyrinth area, and also someone, or maybe the same person has come, they've cut a pathway from our yard space out in front up into the playground area, which had been completely overgrown and blocked for some time. Now, folks, you do understand we're still closed, right? Yeah, we're still closed at the campus. But then again, church was never about, will never be about this campus. And what I've seen in spades, just in the not even 3.5 months of this year, is that the campus closure has held no power over your volunteer spirit. Because being in service to others and doing so from the very best of who you are, that's simply a very big piece of the truth of who you are. And so I thank you, each and every one of you, from the bottom of my heart, for answering your call, your soul's call to service, and doing so once again with such grace and from so much love. God bless you.